Welcome to the Glassworking shop. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a solid color blowout on a metal blowpipe. I learned this technique from Dustin Revere. He shows that on his videos, and it's probably a technique derived from and similar to the standard techniques used in furnace work for soft glass. The metal blowpipes for flame working for use with the NQALHA are not readily available. I think there's a few available out there, but they're few and far between. So I got a machine shop. I just made one. This is a 1/2-inch diameter stainless tube with a 3/4 diameter stainless solid on the end, welded and machined on the lathe. And it works really well. So, going to be, get that guy to stay still, yeah. Going to be doing a solid color blowout on the NQALHA. And for those who don't know, I know this is pretty basic for people who know glasswork, but for those who don't know, glass color rods are sold just as like a 1/4-inch diameter by 18-inch long rod. And if you want to make a rod into a tube, well, there's a number of ways of doing it. The way that I'm going to be doing it is called a blowout, which is you form a ball of glass, a gather of glass on the end of the blowpipe, heat it up really hot, and then blow a bubble into it. And then elongate the bubble, and you have a tube. Another method of doing it is called coil potting, and that's where you kind of take the rod and melt it around in a circle and make this kind of spiral, coiled up kind of thing. And that works, and it works just fine. Some people notice that you can actually see the lines left over from the coil potting, and they don't want to see the lines in their finished work. And so the blowout is actually preferred for a more uniform color. If you really want to do it seriously, if you really want to do it right, it's done from a crucible of molten glass, and you kind of pull it out and blow it in some secret way, I don't know, but I believe that's how commercial tubing is made, is from crucible glass. So I'm going to get started here. First off, got a 12mm tube, a glass tube, that after the blowout is finished, I'm going to remove it from the metal blowpipe and then weld it onto this glass tube. The good news and bad news about the metal blowpipe, let me get this flare on the old flare-o-matic here. And yes, the NQALHA is a fast and easy flaring tool. This goes so fast. I'm going to put an earplug in the end of this tube to seal it off a little bit. The good news and bad news about these metal blowpipes, the good news is when you're heating this really hot ball of glass on the end, the pipe will not collapse. It just gets red hot and it retains its strength. If you try doing a blowout on clear glass, it's rather difficult to keep the attachment tube from getting loose and sagging and having the whole thing fall over. What I used to do when I was doing blowouts on clear, I would thicken the wall of the clear to make it very thick with a very small hole. That works. I've heard that some people will build up a layer of some sort of a stiffer color that doesn't melt as easily as clear, something like black. They'll put a big ring of black around their clear blowpipe. But for this, I'm just using the metal. The good news is you can get it really hot and it still retains its strength. The bad news is if it gets cold, it cracks. So you got to constantly be aware of keeping this connection point between the metal and the glass, keeping it hot enough that it doesn't crack. Very first time I tried it, even while I was thinking about it, got to keep it hot, got to keep it hot, got to keep it hot. I didn't keep it hot and it cracked. So, got to keep it hot. So to start off, I'm gonna heat the end of the blowpipe, get it up to red hot. I'm gonna be using a rod here of North Star, I think it's hyacinth. It's a kind of a purple color, somewhat challenging to work with. You don't want to overheat it because it definitely will get into trouble. It'll boil and booger up your surface. So I'm going to be using positioning mode on the NQALHA, where when I push the foot pedal, the blowpipe the blowpipe rotates, and I'm doing this so that I can get this first layer of glass kind of precisely placed on the end. Kind of careful here. I'm building what the soft glass guys call a moil, which is the connection point between the metal and the glass. And then I'm kind of starting off kind of like a bit of a coil pot. And then I'm going to go to rotation mode here. I'm using a Herbert Arnold torch with compressed air and working in the far flame because I don't want to overheat this glass. This glass is pretty easy to overheat and boil, and so just slowly, gently feeding in the rod. That's my low pressure air compressor kicking in. I'm using a homebrew low pressure high volume, or high volume low pressure, I think that's the typical way it's said. The oxygen system, it's a kind of a hybrid oxygen system, and so I have 3 high pressure tanks, regular K tanks, that are pumped up to 1,000 psi using an oxygen concentrator and a home fill, and connected with a check valve to a tank pumped up to 175 psi, which is being fed from 3 15-liter per minute oxygen concentrators. So if I'm running a smallish flame, the 3 concentrators can keep up, but this is a 65 millimeter Herbie, and it uses a lot of oxygen if you turn the flame up. So when I exceed the capability of the low pressure system, then the check valve allows the 3 K tanks to take over, and I can actually rage this thing pretty darn hot for as long as the K tanks last. I don't run the system all day, every day, and so it's able to keep up with the level of work that I do. So I've got my torch on a linear bearing, so I can move the flame around, kind of keep the gather hot. Keep the moil hot. Go back over, preheat the rod. Trying to be careful to avoid boiling this color. I do see a few what looks like little air bubbles, and I suspect that that may be trapped air bubbles, just air in the glass, but it's hard to say. I am using compressed air in the flame, and that tends to help a little bit with avoiding boiling. And also, like I said, I've got the gather that I'm building is in the far flame, so going also rotating reasonably quickly with my right hand synchronized to the NQALHA so that I don't overheat any one section of this rod. And it looks like it's, and there may be one or two little boily bubbles, but okay, so now when I get to the end, I don't want to burn my rod holder, so kind of get that last little bit of rod down there. Try to do it without introducing air. Now when Dustin does his demo, he pulls the end off of it just because he thinks that the glass on the end of the rod is not really super good glass. Kind of looked okay to me, so I'm going to leave it on. In a reverse direction here and start forming and shaping using the paddle. I'm doing a couple of things with the paddle here. I'm kind of compressing and forming and smoothing up this little mini moil where the glass connects to the blowpipe, and forming a kind of a cone shape. And also, since I'm going to be soaking a tremendous lot of heat into this gather, I also use the paddle to kind of keep the surface a little bit cool. Because once again, this is a kind of a sensitive color, and keep the paddle cool by putting it in the water bucket occasionally. It's a kind of a sensitive color, and I don't want to overheat the surface and boil the surface as I'm trying to soak heat into it. Let me hook up my blow hose on my blowpipe. So I got a blowpipe, a blow tube, and a blow hose, and I always use the wrong term to describe them. So got my blow hose connected, and then little bit by little bit. In order for this process to work, the gather has to be really hot. And glass is an insulator. So even though it looks like it's glowing really nice on the surface, it's still cold on the inside. You can't blow a bubble into cold glass. For this process to work, the glass needs to be heated all the way through, which takes a lot longer than you think. This is a kind of an advantage of doing the work on the NQALHA, because I know for me, when I'm doing handwork, I'm always in a hurry, and I always try to go too fast. And I always overheat and just don't get it right because I'm just in a hurry. And my hand is getting tired and I want to get it over with. On the NQALHA, machine's doing all the work, so I can just kind of like sit back, watch it, let it go as slow as it wants to go. Occasionally touching with the paddle, trying to keep it on center, but more importantly, kind of cooling the surface a little. And as I'm cooling the surface, the heat continues to soak into the core, because this thing needs to be ripping hot. And the thing about this procedure, even when you think it's hot, it's not hot. Even when you think it's hot enough, it's only about halfway there. And so it's just a lot of slowly waiting. Now the surface of the gather is looking nice and shiny. I see no evidence of boiling going on. One thing that I'm doing is concentrating my flame. Let me turn up the fire just a bit here. I'm concentrating my flame on the large part of the mass of the glass. If you don't get the big part hot enough and get the connection point where it connects to the blowpipe, if you get that too hot, then you end up, the failure mode is that you end up with the bubble blowing out the side. And so it's important, it's a kind of a balance going on here. You got to keep the connection point, keep this mini moil nice and hot so it doesn't crack and fall off, but also make sure that the majority of the flame is going on the thick part of the gather so that you're not overheating the thin part while the thick part is still cold. So, looking good. No evidence of boiling. Looking nice and shiny, looking real happy. I'm going to give it a puff and just see if, because I can feel in the blowpipe, I can feel the resistance and kind of be able to feel when, yeah, I got a bubble going. So I'm going to give it a little puff. Nope, don't have a bubble going yet. Really, this takes a lot longer than you think, even if you think it's going to take a long time. And once again, that's the nice thing about the NQALHA. You just kind of like let the machine do the work, take your time, don't get bored, don't try to rush things, slow as it goes. Looking good. Moil is hot, the gather is hot. It's on center. One thing I've learned about glasswork, you gotta always keep your piece on center. That earlier in my exploration of glass, I kind of got a little sloppy, as beginners often do, and thought, oh, it's okay if it's a little off center, I'll fix it later. Well, you can't do that. If it's a little off center, it ain't getting better. It just gets worse. So always just keep it on center through the entire process. If you see it getting a little bit off, don't leave it till later. Another little puff. Okay, I think I might be right on the edge. I can almost feel it starting to form a bubble, but I'm going to give it a little more because blowing too early will result in a bubble that's off center and probably end up popping out through the side. So, looking very much on center, looking nice. No evidence of boiling. Take it out of the flame. Nope. Thought it might be ready, but not yet. Even when you think it's going to take a long time, it still takes a longer time than you think, even when you think it's going to take a long time. Of course, getting the bubble started is the tricky part. Once the bubble is started, then it gets bigger really fast. And so your first little puff is going to be pretty vigorous, but then you got to like dial back really quick because you don't want the bubble getting too big. You just want to form a little bubble keep the wall thickness from getting too thin, and just barely have a little bubble with nice thick walls. Okay, I think I've got a bubble started. I'm going to give it a little more heat, soak a little more heat into that core. It's definitely a bubble. So now that it's a bubble, I'm going to put it back in the flame and let it condense down a little bit, because this process is not guaranteed to produce uniform wall thickness. If you get uniform wall thickness on the first blow, well, you're lucky. So the recommended procedure is to, once you get your bubble formed, put it back in the flame, condense it down a little, blow it. So blow, condense, blow, condense, blow. And every time you condense following by a blow, it ends up making the wall a little more uniform. So once again, I'm using the paddle to cool the surface, kind of like give it a little bit of help in condensing, making it a little smaller, keeping it on center. Slow as it goes. Don't want to rush this process. Keep the paddle cool. So, out of the flame, let it stabilize for a moment, and then another puff. Bubble is staying on center, looking real nice, and bubblicious. Don't want to let the bubble get too big at this stage. So I'm gently coercing it. Back into shape. And I'm gonna get my Bunsen going here. Just a little extra insurance. Keep that moil hot. Because when I start working on the weld on the end, the moil is going to definitely be getting cold, no doubt about it. Very, very gentle paddle pressure. One thing I noticed as I'm watching the expert glassworkers work is how gentle they are. And of course, when I started, I was just going to manhandle that into shape. I was going to let the glass know who's boss and just be brutal with it. And you can imagine how the results came out. So now I'm starting to respect the glass and just be delicate. One last blow. And then Gonna condense it down for the last time. Looking nice. Get that guy back on center. So now I'm going to reduce down to a very small flame and some of that pesky carbon buildup off. So the Bunsen's keeping the moil hot. I'm going over to the end and focusing my small flame right on the end, and now I'm going to blow out a little blister. Very, very gently. So when I do my weld, I'm not going to be talking while I'm doing it because get a little heat into this rear end before I continue. I'm not going to be talking while I do it because I got to pay attention. But the procedure is going to be heat, take it out of the flame, stop the rotation, push, pull, and blow. So here we go. Make sure it's on center. Weld looks beautiful. Give it just a little bit of tiny flame just in case it needs any help melting in. It's looking very much on center. So now that it's connected to glass, I want to get it off that steel as soon as I can. I'm just moving toward the steel, moving the heat toward the steel. Don't need Mr. Bunsen anymore. I'm going to see if I can get this guy disconnected with as little loss of glass as I can get to preserve as much of the color as I can get. I'm slightly pulling a little as I'm thinning the glass as it comes off the blowpipe. Just slightly thinning. Put a little bit of air into it. Concentrating the heat on the blowpipe. Now I could finish it up on the NQALHA, but you know, the finishing part goes pretty fast. I think I'll just finish it by hand. Get that earplug out of there. Using a little bit of gravity here. And that will do it. Kind of like even out the heat a little bit. Turn Mr. Bunsen off. And that is a nice little cylindrical piece of hollow glass that will be used for something. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but everything looks nice. The surface looks nice. Weld looks nice, and I'm pretty sure the wall thickness is nice. So I'm letting it cool for a moment before putting it in the kiln. Obviously, if I put it in when it's red, I'll get a flat spot. So there we have it. So this concludes the video of solid color blowout on the NQALHA. I'll probably make another one where I do a solid color blowout and then follow that with vacuum sleeving in clear, which the NQALHA does an excellent job of vacuum sleeving, either for a vac stack or just for sleeving a piece that's been blown from solid. So, thank you for watching. It's been fun.